Welcome to Varrio Voices, where we highlight the voices of our barrios, familias, and communities. This is Velas, and I hope you're having a good one. Sit back and enjoy la plática. Órale. Welcome back to another great episode of Varrio Voices. Today's episode with the homie of mine that goes by Sangre Indigena Art on IG. So y'all make sure to follow him. All of his art there really goes to express the importance of being in touch with our own cultura. So I hope that y'all, be inspired by his palabra. Really go to see how even homies in New York really be in touch with what it means to be raza. And so y'all go ahead and tune in. DJ Velas will be here in this rola. And y'all continue to be inspired by your own cultura, Órale.
Yeah, I mean, for art, for me, my journey has been a long one. Art has always been there for me from as long as I can remember. I've been doing art, just from a chiquito, from being a small kid drawing comic books, and my teenage years, graffiti. Throughout high school, I definitely focused on some more painting stuff, but life got in the way. I met my girlfriend and my wife now. We had children. Life got in the way, and for a long period of time, I kind of put that art to the side because I had to earn a living. But I think in the most recent years, like 5 to 6 years, I went back to it, and I noticed that a lot of people would tell me how impactful it was, the things that I was painting. And for me, it had a lot to do with representation. If you notice some of the style that I paint, I've been influenced a lot on what I saw as a kid. My mom, growing up in a very Catholic household, there would be the pictures of the santos and all that stuff, but I never saw a reflection of me in those paintings. So for me, I try to put ourselves in those images, and that's a lot of the style that I do now in my paintings and the portraits. And I think that a lot of that has to do with finding myself and my identity. Growing up brown and growing up here in New York, it's a little bit different experience than I would say in Cali. I came in 87 from Guatemala. Prior to that, my dad had crossed undocumented into the United States. We were lucky enough that he was able to get papers a few years after that, and he brought us from Guatemala to New York. I was about 6 years old, and I still remember, feeling cold for the first time. I remember, feeling like, man, I'm going to die here. This cold is crazy. But, that journey of identity and finding myself, and, it took a long time. And I think that it's important for me to be able to show and reach the community, because when we see our reflections in these type of portrayals that I tried to do, and we learn history, that's older than 1492, I think find a lot of, we find power in that. I find power in that, I feel like when we look back into our history and we looked at, all the things that our countries like Mexico and Guatemala, like El Salvador, Peru, all those places have such a rich history that I don't think we often talk about. And that's pretty much everything that I try to incorporate in my art. I think that there is self-esteem issues that we have as a community. We have a lot of, generational trauma that we suffer from. And I wholeheartedly believe is because a lot of us have been disconnected from that history, from that knowledge of our ancestors. So that's why it's so important for me to reach and dig deep. We, as the first generation immigrants that are here, have to peel back even more layers, because we're so disconnected from our homeland, because we're here, we're in the diaspora of the United States, we've been disconnected. My family came in the 80s because of the civil war that was happening in Guatemala. and that all has to do with United States interfering in Latin America. So to sum it all up, I mean, I think that in a nutshell, that's all that I try to incorporate in my artwork.
And I've been following your artwork for over a year now, and I've been like really resonating with it porque even though it speaks from the gente de Guatemala, it also speaks to me reaching out to my own indigenous roots too, right? My own cultura. Now, kind of want to before we continue on, I kind of want to provide you a space to just share with people where they could find your art. Where is it that they could hear more about what you do?
Yeah, so for me, primarily, I do everything on Instagram. I'm trying to branch out a little bit more. I have my own little website that I have up. I'm hopefully going to start a blog soon, so I can start kind of, being able to share a little bit more through the written communication channels. But right now, it's just a website, my Instagram. I'm getting a lot more opportunities to be able to speak in community settings, in face-to-face conversations. I had mentioned that, prior to the coronavirus, I was heading to the Los Angeles community. UCLA Hammer Museum had invited me to talk a little bit in a panel. Unfortunately, that got postponed. Hopefully, it's a postpone and it's not a cancellation. But, I try as much as I can to communicate with the community through my Instagram, through the internet, through my website, primarily.
And yeah, so for the y'all that are listening, his Instagram is Sangre Indigena Art. So be sure to follow him. He has a great amount of art that really touches our cultura, that really resonates with our gente and so on. Even
yeah, and for me, I do talk a lot about Guatemala because that's been my personal journey, through my history and my family history. But when I talk to folks from Peru, from El Salvador, from Mexico, it all is the same kind of story that I tell. You can basically insert different characters, different people, and it's all the same storyline or the timeline that that Guatemala has gone through. For me, I don't really necessarily see borders. I see Mexico, El Salvador, Honduras, all of that as one. We're Mesoamerica. Like that's our culture. We all share that same heritage. So, it's only been since colonial times that we've had these borders, but technically we're all one people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I was gonna mention too, like it was very it speaks to me a lot that someone from the East Coast really tells a story so profoundly that even I connect to it. Even like we're so far away, you still share the story that, me and my community also resonate with. So, that's something that I applaud you for as well. And that's something else I really like about you too, is that you go and do workshops too with our youth, with other individuals, speaking about, your art, your work, and so on. And I kind of want to like touch upon like, what are some things that you mentioned to our youth? What are some things that you do in your workshops that really stand out?
I think for me, one of the most important things to talk about is identity. I know that, when I talk to a lot of people outside of our community, I think that like the white people, they're a little taken back about how I reject the terms Latino and Hispanic and how damaging those terms are to identify ourselves because, like I had mentioned before, our history is so much older and so much deeper than 1492, So I think that for me, when I talk to our youth, is to help them understand that your history is so rich. It's so grand, like when in our schools that here in the States, they talk about Rome, they talk about Greece, they talk about Egypt, but a lot of the times they don't really go into details about the history of the Americas, and for us as people that have been taught that we're foreigners, that we're illegal immigrants, that we're, those type of things that we hear from, the government that is in place now, So for me to be able to tell the youth their history, to help them understand that they're Native American, their history of, their ancestors, the Mayans, the Mexica, the Inca, like that history is so amazing, and being able to share that with them, and that's part of their history, I think has been the most impactful. Um, and I think when I talk to people after, I had a conversation with folks at Princeton a few months back, and I can sense that it really impacted the students there about hearing their culture and understanding that our history is, and we're not foreigners. We've been on this land thousands of years. I think that action, when you understand that, it's really helpful.
As we begin talking about identity, you kind of want to hear about like how do you begin to explore who you are? How do you begin to reinforce your own identity as from Guatemala y también someone that's living in New York?
I think it goes to two main things. I think hearing the stories of our elders, like my mom, my dad, like hearing some of the stories that they tell about their ancestors and what they did, for example, for me, the stories of my father and his family and where they came from, my father's grandma was she was a curandera. She cured people. She was also a midwife. She knew how to work with the elements. For me, that has always been a profound thing for me. So it starts off with the stories of our own family, our tios, our tias, our abuelas, our parents, starting there. But at the same time, there's a lot of resources and information that you can definitely find specific to where you come from. So if you come from Oaxaca, you come from, the Yucatan, you can find information about where that land and their history comes from, the names and all of that stuff. I think that's primarily the biggest part that I've come across, and the layer and the roots that I've been digging deep into.
And like, is it accessible? Is it really something that's easy to do? Being that and you're living like in an urban area,
and that's a tough part, because a lot of us live in the urban areas or live away from our homelands, but we live in the information age, so we can absolutely have that information that's accessible. It's a little bit harder to get the family stories, because we're so far away from our homelands. That's a little bit tough. But like I said, it does take a commitment to it. It does take a little bit of an effort with the reading and the researching. It is accessible. It's just it is work.
Yeah, and I think you keep on mentioning family stories. And I want to hear real quick, like, what are some of the stories that really resonated with you?
Yeah, I think it's been for me personally was the stories of my father that I had just mentioned, but the stories of myself when I was a baby, being sick as a kid, and my mom bringing me to healers, and some of the details that she shares of the flowers or the herbs that were given. Like, to me, the spirit world has always resonated with me and my family, and it's always been something that has captured my imagination, but also kind of kept me grounded of where we come from.
And I think it's really important también is to keep on reaching out to our own familias, listening to the stories, and being grounded. And I want to hear a little bit more about, like, what are some ways that you keep yourself grounded in these times?
Yeah, so for me, I with all the research, and also part of the work has also been reaching out to different resources and communities or organizations. Most recently for me, I got in touch with the International Mayan League in DC. We communicated back and forth. I did a couple of projects for them. And I was able to get grounded through some of the resources that they were able to offer me. More specifically, I was able to meet a couple of Mayan elders where, again, talking me through a couple of things and some of the knowledge and wisdom that they shared was primarily what I think grounded me the most in recent times.
And with those la palabra that the elders have shared with you, from the people that are in the Maya League, what kind of ways do those teachings take to influence your kind of work?
For me, I think it was the profound information about the calendar and in way of thinking of, there is no such thing as, separation of spirit and science. Everything's all together. Um, so I think that has been the biggest thing for me, because if you look at some of the artwork, I'm always talking about, the Mayan calendar, and, it's a little bit more complex. And, I think that we don't have enough time to talk about that, but I think, um, finding that spirituality has spoken to me so much. And I think the conversation that I've had with those elders about how that knowledge came to be, how it was used, and how it continues to be used, and how it's a legacy that is left by our ancestors, and how it survived through colonization, has also been such a eye-opening thing for me. So it's sacred to me. I definitely take that conversation that I had with them very seriously, and I think that I can. It was just the start of my knowledge base on what was that wisdom, what was that knowledge, and I'm continuing to learning by not just through them, and not through just the mind league, but also through reading. And sometimes my artwork, as I'm doing researches for different pieces, I'm able to get some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think how you mentioned, like, we're still learning, even like for myself that have, really dwelled in like cultura también, like, it's still a lot of things to learn.
Yeah, and you know what too? It's also about not feeling ashamed anymore. I know a lot of us may be hesitant because maybe we don't know, maybe who our people or who our ancestors was, and that's okay. Maybe some of us are a little bit ashamed because our Spanish is not that great, or we may not feel like we are worthy enough of doing that. But the one thing that I will say is that all of that stuff, that's the kind of generational trauma that we have to break. We have to look beyond that, because it's not our fault that these things happen, like the colonization, the migration that happened to the States. Like, that's not something that's our fault. It's up to us to break those chains and say, you know what, I'm going to still have that connection, I'm going to still have those things, because if it's not for us, it's for our children. Like, for me, my kids, everything that I learn, I pass it on to them. I make sure that they know, everything that I know, like down from the creation, our own creation stories of our ancestors, and all that stuff. My kids know about that. So I think it's super important, because I think that that's how we break this generational trauma.
And for those that are beginning to, learn about cultura and find their identity, what are some tips that you give them?
I think being grounded, like you said, is probably the most important thing. We have to make sure that, we understand that we are searching, and it's okay for some things not to fit our narrative. Sometimes there's some hard pills to swallow. For me, for example, is that, Guatemala, although it's close to 70% indigenous of the entire population, there's still a lot of racism that happens with the native population there, including a lot of self-racism. And I think that that's really important, is to stay grounded. Walk with respect. There is protocol. Like, you want to make sure that that you just walk with that. Stay grounded, and you walk with respect. I think that's the biggest thing that I would say. And that's a lot harder to say. It's a lot harder to do than just saying it. It's important, as there is a lot of heavy history when you do into looking for researching. There's a lot of things that are hard pills to swallow, but I think if we stay grounded, you walk with respect, and you make sure that you're following protocol, especially when you're reaching out to indigenous communities, from where you're from, I think that level of respect has to be there. You have to understand the history that has happened. I think that has been the most important thing for me.
I appreciate those tips, and I think a lot of people are really gonna take that to heart when they start beginning to discover more about themselves and reflect to this episode and really go to a further learn from your palabra. And I just wanted to leave this last couple minutes to an open floor of any tips, any suggestions, anything that you want to share with the gente.
I mean, I think we've only had such a limited time of talking, and I think that this is a much bigger conversation. I know a lot of people are searching in terms of finding that identity and also reconnecting with those indigenous roots, and there's a lot of back and forth, there's a lot of debate, but at the end of the day, I just wanted to say whatever is in your heart, it will speak to you, and I think that that's important. I can't help to say that because I do see a lot of debating about who can be indigenous, who cannot be. But at the end of the day, I think follow your heart and your intentions, and your integrity. You have integrity. You have respect. I think that is the most important thing.
And just how you mentioned, we are in limited time, so I'll be more than glad to have you back for another episode.
Yeah, I would be more than glad to do so. I'd definitely be part of more of the discussion. I wanted to thank you for having me. I'm hoping to be able to, at some point be able to touch down on the West Coast. I've never been there. I'm a straight New York kid, so I'm straight from the East Coast. So I'm hoping one day I can touch ground there in the West.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know when you're coming by. I'll be happy to show you around there. But muchas gracias. I really appreciate your time. Appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Appreciate everything that you're doing over there in the East Coast too.
Yeah, and anybody feel free to reach out. I have, through email, through Instagram. I'll be more than happy to converse.
All right, muchas gracias.
All right, man.
And like always, muchas gracias for tuning in to this episode. Y'all been a great support in making these things happen, continuing this podcast, continuing the highlighting of our own voices, right? So muchas gracias. Hope you all applauding yourselves, giving yourselves love. And, just like always, hope you having a good one there. Y'all been tuned to Varrio Voices, where we highlight the voices of our barrios, familias, and communities. This is Velas, and like always, much love, cuídense.